Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Friday, October 8th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Maryland game is in one day, the game against Michigan in 50 days. Over the last couple of weeks, Ohio State has finally looked like Ohio State on the football field. Hasn't that been nice for all those Buckeye fans out there? But it has come against Akron and Rutgers, so it's hard to know exactly how much to read into that. Luckily for all of us, my guest today is here to tell you just how much to read into all of that. His name is Ross Fulton. He is Buckeye Scoop's X's and O's guru. Ross, thank you for joining me.
Happy to be here as always, Tom.
So, Russ, we generally open these shows on offense, but it feels like the defense is like the thing that everyone wants to know about. So I think we're just going to talk defense today. After several weeks of going with, one high looks to start the season, and, we've talked all about, cover one, cover three, all the stuff that Ryan Day loves, the Buckeyes really changed things up with a ton of cover two against Rutgers. Is that something you think they did because of what Rutgers was trying to do or what Rutgers likes to do? Was that just trying to get it on film? Was there some other reason? Why did we see such a dramatic change?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of all the above there. So cover two made a lot of sense against Rutgers because they're a very horizontal attacking offense. So, sideline to sideline, they like to run power read or jet sweeps, things that get to the edge. And so cover two puts your, if you could imagine a diagram in our head of cover two, you have two deep safeties and your corners are up. And so the corners have force support. So when a team's attacking the edge, that puts your corner right there to force the football back inside. And so we saw that a lot. On Saturday, I do think also that they are trying in general to supplement and obviously not be so predictable in terms of, using not only cover one and cover three. I mean, there's various levels of this. They're running a lot of different types of cover three as well. But they also then are mixing in cover two. And so, they each present the offense with different, there's different things that work against cover three versus things that work against cover two. So you keep them off balance. It's pretty easy to rotate from one to the other. And so I do think there's also an emphasis right now on using, if in some ways, things that aren't their base defense, right? Because you want to force teams to start planning for that as well. So then you can go back and sort of mix all the above in as you get into the meat of the schedule.
You wrote about some of the different variations they showed on some of these defenses, including Meg. And Meg, in this case, is not a Stanford field hockey player. There's a deep cut for you longtime Ohio State online fans. But Ross, can you explain what Meg is when we're talking about a defense and why the Buckeyes were doing it at times on Saturday?
Yeah, so it just means man everywhere he goes. So Meg, as the acronym. And so a lot of, again, so we have to think back to what have been the things that have really caused Ohio State problems early in the season. And they've had a lot of trouble with like trip sets, through wide receivers, bunch sets. We saw that against Tulsa. And so they are trying to adapt to deal with that. And so against Rutgers, a lot of times when you saw those, Rutgers use a lot of bunch sets, they use a lot of trips, a lot of quads. Obviously, they've watched the film too. And, one thing Ohio State did is they ran Meg to the backside, so to the weak side, so where you have a single receiver. That means they put the corner in man, and that allowed them to rotate the coverage to trips. And so from Ohio State's perspective, they have been – one problem is it was essentially like an automatic check for them that when a team went trips, they were going to play man coverage against it. And obviously offenses knew that. And so then you can take advantage of it. So they're not going to let teams anymore dictate to them what coverage they're going to be in. And so they want to adapt, whether it's cover two, cover three, whatever they're running, to trips or bunch sets. And there's checks that you can use. And so that's what I was referring to earlier. It was like, you're also just getting a lot more variety within each of these coverages because there are variations and ways to adapt them. And so you're starting to see that.
That sounds almost like a box and one in basketball, where it's like you've got the one guy who's in man and the other guys can play zone on the other side or whatever.
That pretty much, yeah, that's pretty much it. Especially when you run split safety coverages, you can divide the field in half and you can run two separate coverages to each side. And that's one of the benefits of having two safeties. And so, yeah, that is essentially what you're doing is you're playing a box and one so that you can zone or, essentially trade off receivers to the three receiver side and then play man on the guy who's singled off. And so obviously, thinking forward, you can, where that can get you in trouble is if the single receiver is really good or better than your corner. And, so that's always the cat and mouse game of football, and you have to adapt yourself to your opponent. But against Rutgers, they weren't going to get hurt by that guy vertically. And so they were able to do that.
Yeah, Jahan Dotson's on the schedule coming up later this month. That'll be an interesting thing. Maybe we'll be talking about that during Penn State week. Something that it feels like we're seeing more with the Buckeyes defense is dropping defensive linemen into coverage to cover for defensive backs who are blitzing. I mean, just kind of the old zone blitz concept. That's something that they can often get away with. It was something Ryan Day was asked about this week because of the athleticism of some of the guys they have out there. So can you explain Trap 2 and how that can confuse an opposing defense?
Yeah, and so again, the same principle to what I was talking about, variety of coverages, is applying to what they're doing up front. They're using a lot more, a zone blitz is where you bring 5 or 6 guys, but you're playing a zone coverage behind. So like your stereotypical one is like cover 3 instead of like 3 deep defenders and 4 underneath. You're playing 3 deep and 3 under. So you're obviously a little less protected, but you count on the zone blitz to throw them off. Or then you have simulated pressures where you still only rush 4. But one of your rushers is a linebacker or a defensive back. And so you essentially often are overloading a side. So you're still dropping guys like a defensive lineman or 2, as you were describing. And so again, you're trying to basically leave the offensive line blocking air on one side and bringing guys to the other. And so Trap 2, same principle as the name implies, you're bringing pressure from a side. And then you essentially have one of your corners sitting in the flat because you're hoping the quarterback gets the football out quickly and throws it into the trap. And so, you are essentially trying to bait that quick throw that the corner can then step into. And so, that's just one example. We're seeing a variety of, they keep using the cross dog blitz, which is where, they cross the 2 inside linebackers on a blitz and then they drop both defensive ends out. So they were still playing a 2 deep 5 under zone, but again, with pressure coming up the middle. So there is, this is the stuff that you see all other defenses run. It's just like Ohio State wasn't doing any of it. And so they've taken a gigantic leap forward to being more like other college football defenses.
A massive leap forward to average. Like I think a month ago, Ohio State fans would have happily taken that. And here we are. Someone who, you have been a little ahead of the curve on telling Ohio State, like, hey, you can't do what you're doing the first couple of weeks. You should be doing the stuff you're about to be doing in the next 3 weeks. Something else you were ahead of the curve on was we were all talking about Craig Young as the bullet. And, Craig Young is going to be the bullet this fall. And you've been kind of banging the drum for Ronnie Hickman for quite a while. And Ronnie Hickman has been either first or second on the team in tackles in 4 of the first 5 games. So I'm not sure I'm willing to concede that you know what you're talking about, but I'm starting to think you might maybe know what you're talking about. So how are they using Ronnie Hickman so effectively?
Yeah. And part of the reason I was banging the table for Ronnie Hickman is I wanted them to do more of what they're doing now, which is if you have another safety out there, you become a much more versatile defense. And so part of what they're doing with Ronnie Hickman is he is essentially a boundary safety. He's a strong safety, if you will. And so, when they align in 2 high safeties pre-snap or play, split safety coverage, he is to the short side of the field. And then you have Bryson Shaw or Latham Ranson to the wide side of the field. And so by playing him to the short side, depending, again, a lot of college offenses, they like to play 2 or 3 wide receivers to the wide side of the field, and they'll put their tight end to the boundary. And so when they do that, Hickman can then just be more aggressive against the run. So you're still in a split safety coverage, but you get that additional guy coming down in the box. And he's very good at that, obviously. And so that fits his skill set well. And, compared to when we can get into how they should use Craig Young, and I've talked about that a little bit in my article this week, but, he's much more of a linebacker. So now you have in Hickman a safety who is good against the run, essentially, which is what they need and gives them a lot more versatility. He can play up near the line when they go back to cover 1 or cover 3, but he can also be a deep safety, and you don't have to pull guys in and out to get those different looks.
All right. You mentioned Craig Young. So let's talk about Craig Young. What are they doing with him? And, he's still not getting a ton of snaps right now, but when might that become a bigger part of the game plan? Yeah.
And again, so, looking ahead, and you gotta guess, right? So Rutgers looks at the last 3 or 4 weeks of film, and they see a ton of split high, all the issues we talked about with one high, and all of a sudden Ohio State's playing a bunch of cover 2 against them. So that obviously you gain on that opponent an advantage for a period of time. But by the second half, they started to adjust. And one thing is in cover 2, how they're playing it. So again, you have Hickman and Shaw or Latham Ransom as your deep safeties. That puts the quote unquote cover safety, which would be much easier for everyone if we just called that guy nickelback or slot corner, up. He basically is, to use another terminology like Meg, he is the apex player. And so all that means is like literally what the term apex means. He is creating essentially a triangle between himself and the slot receiver and the offensive tackle. So he's not fully covered up on the slot receiver. He's cheating towards the box. That makes that guy, especially in cover 2, has to play the run, and he's responsible for a gap. And so, Marcus Williamson and Cam Martinez are essentially corners. And, Rutgers realized this. So early in the game, they were running to the boundary. Ohio State solved that issue by playing cover 2 and having Hickman come down. So then they started running to the field at that guy, and they did fine. But, from Ohio State perspective, I don't think you necessarily want Cam Martinez having to fill the run like 35 times a game when you're playing Michigan. And they're a spread team, but they use lots of 2 tight ends. They're going to run lots of counter tray right at you. And I assume it seems like Ohio State also realizes this is an issue because they moved Craig Young before any of us talked about it. And so Craig Young still had the bullet. It's just the bullet, given what they're doing on defense, where you need it has changed. So now you need it at that to come in for that cover safety position instead of where Hickman is. And so that is always kind of where Craig Young fits anyways. Think Darren Lee, it's kind of where Darren Lee lined up. And so that's, we'll see how much he gets used there, but I think that might be important going forward.
But before we get to Michigan, we got to talk about Maryland first. This is obviously a very different team from Rutgers. I mean, the quarterback play, the skill talent across the field is going to be a dramatic step up. I mean, this is not Alabama, but this is a team that is a substantial step up, especially in offensive skill talent from what you saw last week at Rutgers. What are you expecting the defense trying to do schematically on Saturday? Is this going to look similar to what they did against Rutgers? Are they going to do they have to do something else because of the challenges that Maryland presents? What are you expecting?
To me, this game and what I'm looking for is all about how well Ohio State can handle run pass options from what they're doing, because Maryland will use a ton of them. And, again, a lot of what they've done is to adapt because they're getting killed with them because there's very predictable who was going to be red and how you could put that person in conflict. So, a lot of the zone blitzes, sim pressures, they're trying to change up. A, they're trying to take away the guys being stuck in that position, and B, trying to change up, who's being read, what the quarterback's seeing. And so, whether they play as much cover 2, I mean, one benefit of cover 2 is, again, it puts one more guy underneath. And so a lot of where those run pass options go, you have a guy, now sitting there. I think they'll continue to mix that. They also have been using a lot more what is called cover 3 buzz. So again, like when you have 2 deep safeties, Hickman will then at the snap drop into what the hook curl zone. But to think about in your mind, essentially where they throw those inside slants, he's now responsible for that. So that can handle some of that as well. So I bet we'll see lots of that also. But I think it'll be a good test just to see how far along the defense is dealing with run pass options compared to where they have been.
Well, Ross, thank you as always for joining me. These are always one of our most popular shows every week. I'm sure if everyone who's listening right now is a little smarter than they were 15 or so minutes ago when they started. So that's always a good thing. Always a nice way to start your day, getting a little smarter. So Ross, thank you for joining me.
Happy to be here, Tom. Thanks.
And you can find Ross's work at BuckeyesScoop.com. He writes at least 1, sometimes 2 articles a week, depending on how much there is to talk about. Sometimes when there's too much to talk about, that's not a great thing for Ohio State. So the weeks that Ross writes one thing, that's also sometimes good for Ohio State fans. But whenever he writes, you can find it at BuckeyesScoop.com. He's also very active on our Ask the Insiders board. So if you want to ask Ross schematic questions, you can do that on that board. But you have to be a member of BuckeyesScoop.com to do it. So you can sign up today to become a member, get access to our fantastic team of insiders who have insight and analysis you just can't find anywhere else, including Ross. That's all at BuckeyesScoop.com. And also, you can find all of our great stuff on YouTube, youtube.com/BuckeyesScoop. You can subscribe right there. You can hit the bell if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can click on the little Buckeye Scoop logo that's going to pop up in just a second on the right-hand side of the screen. That will subscribe you to our channel. What that'll do is that will let you get notified every time we post a new video. So when we post a new podcast, we do a live pregame show, a live postgame show, live interviews with Ryan Day or the players during the week or after the game. You just get a little notification on your phone that says, hey, do you want to watch this? It might be interesting to you. You can click on that, and then you can watch whatever's going on right as it's going on, so you never miss a thing. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.